What's up, y'all? Welcome to the very first session of Making Magic. Hey, we have Deborah Jack here with us. Amazing.
Hi.
We were just talking about Black women hair and being chameleons and, just leaning into that.
Right. Looking at the gorgeousness that's in front of me.
You exactly, like echoing it back at each other. So anyway, well, I have my drink in hand. And what are you sipping on?
A margarita.
Yes, y'all.
Because once it's lemon and sour and alcohol is like any combination that I'll try.
Delicious. Tequila is good because it's like an upper,
Yes.
like as opposed to just being, because y'all, it's 2:30 right now, just so you
Right.
know. So yeah.
It's happy hour somewhere.
Yeah, it is. And it's Thursday. We're almost at the weekend. So
yes.
I'm drinking a cherry brand. This is such a random concoction. I'm drinking cherry brandy, which is like, who has cherry brandy just like hanging around? But I have cherry brandy because I went apple picking like about a month ago, like upstate. And they had like a little shop with all their like little apple-y things. But they happen to have this cherry brandy. I was like, oh, let's get it. So I'm sipping on this mixed with coconut water.
Mixed with coconut water? Oh,
yeah, I know it's so odd, but it's actually good.
I could see that. I like to mix things too. I almost brought there's a beverage in St. Martin, a liqueur called guava berry. It's our national drink. It's made from these tiny red berries that's steeped in white rum. And then you pour it out. And it's really it's sweet, but it's dangerous. Like it doesn't take a lot at all. And people usually drink it around Christmas time. But I got some bottles when I came on my last trip at home. And so I started mixing it. I was mixing it with red wine. I mixed it with a Cabernet, pomegranate juice, and a little sparkling water. Oh, wow. And it was like the best drink ever. But then after I tried to walk, I was like, whoa.
Well, rum and red wine sounds like you are really trying to set yourself up.
I thought you were a little bit.
Well, cheers to you.
Cheers to you.
And your show, y'all, she has a retrospective. Is that correct to call it a retrospective?
Yeah. I guess, like a mid-career retrospective. That's kind of what we're doing.
Major.
I hope there's more to go, so I say mid-career.
Yeah, no, you have way more to go. So cheers to that, which is at Pen and Brush. Shout out to y'all.
Pen and Brush. Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah. So this is the first time I'm doing this because usually, I do like a mix and kiki, which I mean, anybody who watches this by now just knows that it just kind of goes how it goes. Like it's just very vibesy, very chill. Right. So Making Magic is essentially that same essence, but like I was telling you before I hit record, it's basically an invitation to talk about spirituality. And I have to put it in quotes because, we were talking about how when you say the word spirituality, it has like a lot of loadedness to it and it feels very heavy, but I don't mean it in a heavy way. Like it can be heavy and I acknowledge that, but it's for me, I'm just like, okay, I'm fascinated by it, like I'm collecting my crystals, I'm reading my cards, I have my little altar, set up, which I take seriously, but at the same time, like, there's like a lightheartedness to it too. But yeah.
It doesn't always have to be like this dark and moody thing that I think people bear in mind. I think most people sort of carry it with them, like, in through life. And it's a way to operate in the world, I think. So yeah, I don't think it has to be that heavy.
Yeah. Wait, so I just learned recently that and you just said it too, St. Martin?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did you grow up there?
Yeah. My family is from deep roots in St. Martin. Today is actually St. Martin Day. St. Martin. We're celebrating it. I'll go look at the festivities online after this. But yeah, that's where I most of my life. I moved from the Netherlands as a kid, as a baby, really. My parents, like it's sort of that story of people going to the sort of the city of the colonizer to study. And so they were both from Aruba, and their families were, so they went to Aruba to study and work. Their parents went to work. And so they went to the Netherlands to study and had me, and then left right after, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe I wasn't having it as a kid. I don't know. But yeah, I grew up in St. Martin. So when people ask me where I'm from, I'm from St. Martin. I don't recognize any other place to be from.
Listen, you better claim those roots. But wait, so how long have you been in New York?
New York now, like I live in Jersey City. So I've been here for 16 years.
Okay.
This stretch, but I did undergrad here. I went back to St. Martin and worked for a while, for like almost like 8 years, 10 years, and then came back to do graduate school and stayed.
Love it. How does that, I mean, so I don't want to harp on the pandemic because I feel like so many sessions, like
Panasonic.
You know what I mean? It was just like, I'm just mentioning it just for the sake of getting up to this question of like, because I know for me, the pandemic kind of put New York in greater perspective. Like New York to me, even though I'm not from here, it's like my home. Like I feel like I became who I am through the experiences that I've had in New York.
Right.
And at a certain point, it was like the end all be all for me. But through the pandemic, it kind of like opened my awareness of like, oh, okay, it's not. You know what I mean? Like it's in a really healthy way where it's just like, oh, you know, I don't have to be here, you know,
Right.
like it will always be here for me. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that happened to a lot of people. I think, you know, you have this relationship to New York. I mean, when I lived in Jersey City, it was because it was close to New York City. My family has lived in Brooklyn since the late 60s, my dad's family. So I've been coming to Brooklyn since I was 6 years old on vacation almost every year of my life to United States. So New York has always been like this place, you know, this city area that you hang out in. And so I wanted to be close to that. So I totally got that idea of like coming of age and thinking about who you are and the city playing such a large role. But I think the pandemic in an interesting way, like had us, we were forced to look inward, right? So even if we were in a city full of people, you were isolated and had to sort of figure out who you were and just how much did the city factor into that anymore, right? So if you take that away, but yeah.
Yeah, like it's like taking a hard look at all of that stuff. But you have like this beautiful balance because you do live in Jersey. So, I mean, I'm sure it offers you that respite, right? Like
yeah, Jersey City is pretty like vibrant, but yeah, I do get to step away from that constant kind of energy. And where I live, is pretty residential. So it's not the suburbs, but it's also not the city. I mean, when I chose the area that I live in, it was really because I didn't want my daughter to grow up in a place that was too hegemonic. Like I wanted her to be around people of different cultures and color, because St. Martin is like that. So I lived in Buffalo for a while and went to school in Amherst, and I'd seen kids who just, you know, had not been exposed to much culturally. Like college was the first time that they were encountering difference. And I was like, yeah, no, not my child. So I always had in mind that wherever I live has got to be a place that's just like culturally diverse. Like yeah.
So it's not like a rude awakening. That's funny, because UVA, University of Virginia, and definitely encountered folks that had not experienced anything outside of like them, and it was very different. So yeah.
I mean, when I went to undergrad upstate New York and in Poughkeepsie, and I remember meeting a kid. Now this is give my age away, like 89. And coming face to face with like,
don't look at it's all good.
51 2 days, a couple days ago, 5 days ago maybe. But I keep saying it's 50 because, you know, 2020 didn't happen. So.
I want my year back. Yeah.
Right. And so I just feel like, I don't know, it's like a leap year kind of thing. But coming to face there with a student from Vermont who had never been on a plane, had never really seen Black people in real life, like other than TV and movies. And I remember just being like, this can't be a thing. You know, like, how is this real? And in talking to him, realized that people were so insulated. Whereas in St. Martin, St. Martin has over like 72 different nationalities that live there. Most people speak like more than one language, if not 3 or 4. So the idea that like you could be sort of like culturally so monotonous in a way, like I just was like, wow, how do I avoid that? Like as I live in this country, so I've always tried to find places that had, like an energy that's had, that kind of like multiple experiences that echo what happens in St. Martin,
Mm-hmm. That sounds beautiful. I've never been to St. Martin before.
Yeah, check it out. I'm biased. I've been to a lot of different Caribbean islands, and I still think,
St. Martin. Yes. Yeah. I feel like obviously, like, yeah. Yeah, like once I ease my way back into like, out of the US travel, that will be on my list. Yeah. Anywhere with like sun, like an opportunity to just like sunbathe and just like be by water, I mean, this is actually a perfect segue into spirituality, because being around water, I feel, I don't know, there's always like such a strong connection of something energetically being around water.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like I can always sense when I'm near water. I have bad sense of direction, but if I always instinctively know what direction to walk in any city that will get me to water. So I always so I learned to trust that. But I think water has a real strong energy. And I mean, I use it a lot in my work because I have like massive respect for it and the currents that happen in water. It's got a lot of power. I think that's why so many cultures and religions and practices, water is so central. Like, how could it not be?
It's true. Yeah. I mean, I'm the same. I have horrible sense of direction, but there is something about like kind of sensing where the water is, that can kind of guide you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt, so I went to Salvador, Bahia, in Brazil. And that was when I was like, I was like, ooh, there's something up with like this water, and just, I'm like, I feel like our ancestors are literally in the water. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So I just really felt that when I was there, and I slept really well. And I don't usually like sleep that great. Like I slept, fully through the night, and I would like wake up early, like feeling refreshed. And I definitely felt like there was just something going on with that water.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this last trip it's interesting. I was able to go. So even though I live on St. Martin and the water is all around me, I go, I film, I take photos. Sometimes I just don't go in for fun sometimes, or just eat. And this last trip, I was really determined to do that when I went home. And because my hip is bad. So I have a bad leg. And so my mobility on land has been like somewhat restricted the last 3 years. And so I was worried about going into the water because I felt like it could pull me out. Like, will I be able to like save myself, or control, be able to stand? And when I went in, it was like, I thought I would need my cane, and I didn't need a cane. Once I was in, I actually felt like strong again, stronger than I'd felt in a long time, like wobbling around on land. But then at some point, like I started to float because I like floating, and I'd been working really hard in the last few years and hadn't had an opportunity to really sort of relax. And I said, you know what, I'm just gonna like lay here. So I started floating and just being like, sort of suspended in the water, looking up at the sky. And I remember going like, yeah, this is what work is this is what it's about, right? This like I said, I'm literally in an in-between space. I'm like floating between air and water, you don't think of it because you're looking at the sky, but I just felt like this sort of like being in this sort of plane between the surface of the water and then the air above me. And just sort of like staying there and like having how sound functioned as it was like muffled in my ears, and just sort of hearing the water and everything being filtered through there. So I think I absolutely could see, I think there's a spiritual quality to water. And then, yeah, that are definitely our ancestors live there. So much of my work is based on that idea, especially with hurricanes. Like, I think that's the ancestors being upset about the Middle Passage, like that. To me, that swirling energy, I think about all these different customs that think of like if a spirit doesn't die a just death, or dies an unjust death, that, that it doesn't rest. And so I think about these, million, hundreds of thousands of people who perished in the Middle Passage, swirling around every year for this season, demanding acknowledgement. And so for me, that's what hurricanes are. So I think there's a certain kind of like spirituality that's in nature. I don't think it's separate. I think we learn to separate a lot of these spaces and places, but they're, for me, it's around you. Like when I'm in water, I have a fear of water, really, actually, like being drowned. And I always feel like, whenever I go into water, I'm always like, I tell somebody, like, keep an eye on me, because I always feel like something pulling me. I'm very aware of like this thing always like pulling me out. And so I'm very like paranoid about like having somebody between me and the open sea when I'm swimming. Because it's very real to me, this like weird current anytime I get into water. So yeah, I think it's there. I think it's around us.
Have like a lot of dreams about water, like nightmares?
No. I feel like I don't remember, either I don't remember my dreams, I don't dream a lot, but I dreamt a lot when I was pregnant. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, I dreamt about tidal waves all the time. Like almost every night, I dream about a tidal wave coming like all the way up to the porch of the house where I live, my mom's house. And it would crash and the rushing water would come right up to the step, and I would be at the step. I would make it to the steps and it would come right up to my feet, and it wouldn't get to me, but it would always, every time it'd be like, I'd be walking, I'd feel the wind shift. I'd feel like you'd hear the sound, and then I'd be like, I know I'd have to run. And then I would run to my mother's house, get to the steps, and then see this wall of water coming. It was so strong, I almost named her Tsunami.
Ooh, that's a name.
And then I was like, you gotta, I'm a firm believer in being careful about names.
Yeah, you gotta be careful.
Yeah. Like, what do you name?
Can you say her name?
Her name is Indigo.
Oh, perfect. Yes, third eye shot.
Yes, her name is Indigo. So yeah, so I settled on that. Between that dream and Daughters of the Dust is how she got her name.
Oh my gosh, Daughters of the Dust.
Influenced by that film so much. I like love that film.
Love it.
And the story about Indigo that was mentioned in the beginning, that I was like, that's some powerful stuff. Like if that's, and I believe names give you your energy somewhat. Yeah, I think when people live up to their names in a weird ways, so
I feel like we pick our names before we enter these bodies, and we like somehow send a signal to the parent,
right? And if they're listening, they hear it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I had a short list that did not include Indigo. Like up until she was born, Indigo was not even a name that I had thought of for her. I had 3 other names that I was dead set on, like had always said if I ever, and then like not even on the short list.
Wow, yeah, okay, so that's powerful. I mean, so the thought of Indigo, well, yeah, you said Daughters of the Dust, but when it came to you, did you like make that connection of that's like why you thought of it, or was it just kind of like, oh?
Yeah, no, when it came to me, I said, okay, this is a strong name. Like I thought about the strength of Indigo as the dye is what I was thinking about the time, that it would leave such a mark that anybody who worked with it was like marked physically by it. And also in our culture, like when babies are born, if they're not baptized, they're considered spiritually vulnerable. So, a lot of times people like, you wouldn't take a baby out the house if they hadn't been christened yet, kind of thing. And what they would do though is take blue. It's called blue. It's like a little blue cube, and it's actually indigo. You would put it in the wash to make your whites bright, which as a kid always confused me because it makes the water blue, but you put white clothing in it and the white comes out. Brilliant, right? But people would take a little bit of blue and put it on the baby's head if you had to go out with the baby before as a form of protection. So I remember just thinking, okay, when I thought of indigo, I said, okay, this works. It's a powerful name. I worry that it might be a little bit too much actually, but I liked it. So I actually spell it with a Y in the middle. The second I is a Y, just to give her some room, I felt.
No, I love it. That's so fun. Okay, so this is the third child named Indigo that I've like heard of within the past like 2 months. So I went to Baltimore with my wife to visit her aunt, and we hung out with one of her friends who like dyes indigo. I mean, she like dyes, textiles with this indigo dye, and she named her son Indigo.
Wow.
Yeah, that's just so funny, like how it all,
Yeah, no, it comes out like, and I collect well, not just randomly, but I have like 3 indigo pieces of fabric that I've collected through my life, that have been given as gifts for like creative things that I just always just put aside for her, as well. But yeah, the name has become like even she commented the other day, he's like, I hear this name other places now. I'm like, I know. She's 23. So I'm like, I think she got it a little before the craze. But there was also that period where people were looking at the Indigo Children.
Yeah.
And so she's born right in that window actually. And somebody thought I named her for that. And I was like, I found out like as years went by, I found out more and more about indigo and how powerful indeed it is, like insignificant. So yeah, it's a popular name. And there's that book, Indigo, Cypress, and Sassafras. I might have the order wrong, but I read it as a teenager.
Yeah, no, that's so funny. No. What else, Miss Girl? What else is going on in the world of Deborah Jack?
Oh, about besides the exhibition, I mean, I'm just trying to, keep busy, try to stay focused. The exhibition has been like an interesting moment for me because people have been like, how do you feel about it? And I keep saying I'm still processing because I don't know what it means to look back at 20 years of your work. I was telling a friend, I said, because I'm a single mom, like most of my family lives in another country and definitely not in the city that I live in. And so I was just always, I felt like I was making work, right? Because I feel like I come from an era where people weren't showing a lot. But you made work because you had something to say. So you just, so for me, it was like trying to find a moment while raising a child on my own, essentially, to find moments to make work and say things that I wanted to say. And so, for me, I just felt like I've been doing this, like keep my head down and just swimming. So, to come up and for air in a way and sort of see the work has been interesting for me, sort of, I've had to, it's been fun because like to sit and look at connections that I didn't even know I was making. That water is really so much. I mean, I know that I'm working with water, but at the same time, and also salt, how inherent it is in the work. So that, that being able to look back and sort of think about that and then wonder, okay, what am I doing? What am I going to do next in a way? But yeah, so I've been doing that. I've been reading a lot. It's been really interesting in the sense of like, there's so much writing now, like I think about Christina Sharp in The Wake, but then I look at writers like Dion Brand, and there's all this language for a lot of the ideas that I've been interested in. Catherine McKittrick, who's a scholar, and she's a scholar of like, and knows a lot about Sylvia Winter, but also she has a book called Demonic Grounds that's looking at how Black women's imaginations is sort of a counter for geography with a capital G, like with all the capitalistic and extraction type of practices behind it. So it's been really, for me now, I'm interested in having this sort of quiet time to sort of like really look at all those things that I've been reading and sort of think about, look at this sort of conversation that's happening. And to me, that's exciting too. that's sort of what I'm up to when I find time.
Yeah, exactly. You got to carve out the time. It sounds like you're like planting the seeds for imagining your next chapter, like whatever that'll be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in this interesting space where my daughter is old enough to leave, right? She's just done with college. And so when she started college, I had to sort of figure out like what do I do now in a way, because you are caught up, especially I think as a single parent, you're like, everything is really tied. And so there's a lot of emotional energy that sort of gets put there that now that she's an adult and is like, thank you, you're free to go. Because if you raise them independent, then like, you can't complain when they're like, peace. She's still around, but you know what I mean? So like, where do I like relocating that energy is a new journey in and of itself.
Relocating?
No, relocating the energy of like
Okay,
raising her and no longer needing that. Like you don't realize how much that actually does take up. I think like psychically and emotionally. So now that it's not needed the same way, that's also for me, like, I feel it going back into sort of like the creative practice even more. So that's exciting because then it's like, oh wait, I have time to sort of sit with this and I don't have to get anybody ready for school. Like I can sit with something, or I can, go off and really be with work. And so that's also like exciting moment.
That is exciting. It just seems like perfectly timed that is happening and you have this mid-career retrospective going on.
Yeah. No, I think it's a perfect timing. The great thing about Pen and Brush has been that I started my relationship with them so early, like back in 2007, when I was a young professor. And one of my colleagues who is older said, when you start teaching and your tenure track, you need to have all these types of like service and things to put in your like sort of portfolio of activities. And she's like, there's this place, Pen and Brush, they need a juror for a show. I think it'd be good for you to go. And I was like, okay, and I went, and that's when they had the brownstone in Lower Manhattan. And ever since then, it's been kind of like, off and on. But it's been fun to watch them grow. And then when I saw the show with Lola Flash, who you had as a guest here, it was really exciting to see that, because like I'd seen her work and seen her in the trenches, and we'd go to a lot of the same conferences and the same like organizations and have shows. And so to see her, when she had her retrospective, that was really kind of like a great and hopeful thing to see, that somebody who had been just putting in this work was getting some visibility. So when they approached me and they were like, would you be able to do this? I was like, yeah, I can do this, which is out of my character. My character is usually to be like, I don't know.
Fine. Okay, now I gotta ask you, what's your sign?
I'm a Scorpio.
Okay, so you're very private.
Yeah.
Private? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Oh, right. So yeah, you just had your birthday too. Yeah.
Yeah. Scorpio. I'm a November Scorpio, which a few of my friends, if they look at this, will laugh at, because I'm very particular about the fact that there's an October Scorpio and there's a November Scorpio.
No,
and they're different
about that. I mean, I'm no like astrology expert, but I'm deeply fascinated by astrology. So like I know a good amount. There is something to be said about like the different phases of a sign, like
right.
Like if you're like in the beginning of that cycle versus the middle versus the end.
Versus the end, yeah. Definitely. Same with like Scorpios, yeah, definitely. I know late Scorpios are different, like intense.
Yeah, Scorpios
like that super intense Scorpios are like, 20th, 19th, and you're like, oh, okay.
When I think of Scorpios, I think of but I think this is like a huge strength though. I feel like Scorpios have this capacity to like dig really deep, like do the like the so-called like kind of like shadow work, like really kind of looking. So something like a pandemic, right, where you're forced to do that kind of work. I mean, I feel like a Scorpio is like, yes, like
yeah,
it's working along. So
I agree. I feel like that was, and and it didn't really, in the beginning, I had trouble understanding what the trouble was for people.
That's funny. Yeah.
And there was somebody who was like, well, you're a Scorpio. And I was like, what? And she was like, this is fine, but because, coming face to face with friends who were struggling with this, and not like, that like we're fans of death or anything like that, but
Yeah.
but that work, that's also where you are able to sit with yourself and have to unpack some of the things that maybe being busy kept you from.
Mhm.
Because I felt a lot of that, where people like were super busy, and as a way to run away from having those kinds of conversations they needed to have. And as I guess maybe the Scorpio in me was like, okay, let's do this. You'll be all right. And I have a lot of friends who are Scorpios, which is funny because I don't, like, in the beginning I didn't know, and then you'd see them celebrating, and you're like, oh wait, oh okay, that's why I understand you. Like, I'm not afraid, because people are usually, whenever you say Scorpio, sometimes people are like, oh,
Hey, you know what? People freak out you can say any sign.
any sign, right. That's true. You say Gemini to people and they're like, I'm like, what?
And I'm a Gemini. And
you think you get a rough rap?
yeah. And I'm just like, okay, get out of here with all that, first of all. Because
I'm just like,
they don't really even know anything about astrology,
right,
like there's so much
right.
nuance to it.
It has to do with your rising as well. Like, I mean, different people present differently based on that. I'm not an expert either, but I have had people try to like explain to me, and so.
Have you ever had like like a reading done or anything like that?
Not like a deep, no, not a deep one. It was fun. Like when we had talked a little bit in the beginning, and I remember years ago, I was a guest reader at the Miami Book Fair for my writing, and there was a party, a reception for the writers, and I can't remember her name, but one of the guests was this really esteemed Mexican astrologer, and like people were like all fighting to sit next to her, but she came to, like, she was supposed to be at like my table, so I was kind of like, hey, I didn't know who she was, but I was sort of, and it was a woman next to me who was like, oh my God, this is great. And I was just sitting and not really doing anything. She looked at me and then she said, she took my hand and she was looking at my hand and she's like, this is very interesting.
Oh wow.
And she's like, she said, oh, you're, I think she asked me if I'd ever had my palm read, and I said no. And she just said, she's like, well, you're very strong. She's like, you're a strong spirit. And then I always remember this because I feel like on some level, I don't know if I'm cursed by it or what. She's like, you won't ever have too much, you won't ever be rich, but you'll always have what you need. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I want to go visit her and be like, could you like give me some extra? A little extra would be okay, but but it was so funny. She's like, you always have enough, like you'll never not have enough. And as an artist, we all know that there are moments where you're just like, what am I, like, how am I getting to this part of the month? But yeah, that's the only time. But she just looked me in the eye and was kind of like, and I've had one other time where friends went for a reading and I was just, I'm hanging out because I'm good. And like the person will look at me, sort of squint and be like, it's okay. And I'm like, all right, like and not read. So I don't know what they're seeing.
You just have some it's that powerful Scorpio energy. I'm always so fascinated when people like can see. I mean, I think we all kind of have the capacity to see in different ways, but I just think that there's always like a lot of distractions, Yeah. I think some people come into the world like specially attuned, to just, I don't know, there's just like something kind of unlocked in their brain or psyche that can kind of like, see auras or see, just energy around people. It's so fascinating.
I agree. And I think we learn not to listen to it. Mm-hmm. We think, oh, like, I don't know. Like I used to joke in college and be like, oh, it's my grandmother's voice in my head. Like I would meet people and be like, no, I'm good. and then a year later hear that they're like, violent or attack somebody.
Yeah.
And people would look at me like, why didn't you like that person? They're so charming. They were so cool. And you were like stiff to them. And I was like, you could do you, but there's something about that thing is, and I'm not going to scowl at them or be angry at them. I just be like, keep my distance. I'll just be like, and it's never not proven me right. And so I always, every time I listen to it, that voice that says, because I'd be in my room sometimes and go like, why you don't even like that person? That person really didn't, I'd be trying to convince myself to not feel away. And then I was like, nah, it's like, you probably, now in your 20s, you're like, what is this? But I've learned that to sort of listen to that voice. But I agree, there's like a lot of noise. I used to see people that weren't there when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I learned to keep that to myself, and it went away. But like I'd see people who died like just before they died, or I'd be like, I saw, and as a kid you're innocent, so you come into your parents and like, so and so is out back, calling me, and everybody, the adults in the room would be very calm, and they'd be like, just don't go outside, you'll be all right, don't go if they call you, because then they would know that the person had died, and I didn't know. I would just be like, so and so is out by the trees in the back, like calling, should we go help them? And they were like, no, we're good, you just hang out here with us. And I'm like, oh, okay. That happened like 3 times in my life where it was like a person came calling. Everybody was like, stay with us.
You were really little. Like, at what point did it stop?
Around 10.
Yeah,
around 10, 11. Then it was just like, but it was never like a scary thing. Like I'd just be like, and the closest was only like one time, I think around 9, there was a man, like I clearly saw a man in the corner of my room, like in a white light. And as a person who was I was a really kind of like a scaredy cat of a kid. Didn't like the dark, didn't want to go under trees, didn't want to walk where there wasn't any light. And so it was really surprising to me that I wasn't afraid of the monster I always assumed would show up.
Yeah.
Was not scaring me. And I remember going to tell my mom, there's a person in white with a giant sword in my room. And she was like, and Caribbean parents are like the best, right? It's like rolled over and she's like, well, are you worried about him? I'm like, no, I don't think he's trying to hurt me. She's like, all right, then, like,
yeah,
stay here or you can go back. And I was like, okay, like I'll stay here for a bit.
It's amazing that she didn't like shut you down, and make you feel like you were like crazy.
No, it was just literally like, well, did you feel scared? Do you think he was gonna hurt you? And I was like, I don't think so. No, he just stood there looking. And she's like, well, maybe he's watching over you or something. And I was like, oh, okay. You're like 8. Your mom says it's okay. So you're like, all right. But I think about those things like later on, I'd be like, wait, what was that? Like, what happened there? But so that's always fun to unpack.
I wish I would have documented more. I mean, of course, it's like, when you're really little and you're kids, you're not thinking about like writing down your dreams and writing down these experiences. But I also, I used to sleepwalk a lot, like when I was really little. And I would see things too, but not necessarily people, but I can't even explain what I would see, but I would definitely see like things or like entities, like not knowing what it was. And I just assumed, I was like, oh, I'm just like in that kind of state of like almost dreaming. Right. I don't know. Like, as I got older, I would just like sort of write it off, but I knew at the time when I was seeing it, I'm like, no, I'm seeing something. I don't know what it is, but yeah.
Right. And I think as kids, you kind of know, and you are sure, right? Like, there's an age where you're not making something up.
Yeah.
Like, something in front of you or that you're seeing.
Like, why would you even need to make it up? It's just like, okay, I don't.
Yeah. I wish I remembered my dreams. I knew I dreamed a lot as a kid. I just don't remember them. And you're right. You never think of writing it down, I write them down now, like whenever I remember my dreams, even if it's like silly, or I just remember like one kind of line or like, a second, I'll write it down, because
sometimes they'll come true and I won't even realize it, you know, like you'll go back to and you're like, oh wow, this is like a foreshadowing of something. So yeah.
I have strong deja vu. I do have that.
Yeah.
Like I'll see things happen and I'll know what somebody's about to say because I've seen this
Yeah.
happen before. Like it used to be scary at one point. Like I'd be like, oh my God, I know exactly what's gonna happen. And then it would happen. And I'm like, how did I see this before? And that's me completely freaked out by that idea. But I've had like conversations with people and I'm in it, I'm like, wait, I remember this. I
Mm.
remember having this conversation like 3 years ago. I remember seeing it's very, yeah, that I don't know what that's about. But I have very strong deja vu that way. Like you know, where you see and when it's happening, it's like, wait, I remember dreaming like, but they're daydreams. They're not dreams that happen when I'm asleep. It'll be kind of like I'm awake and I'll see a scenario briefly.
Yes.
And then at this point, know that I'll see it at some point. Like now I'm no longer like I know what it is. So when it's happening, it's almost like it's a movie because
Mhm.
then I'll know what the next person will do. It's kind of weird. We sound strange.
I know. So it's so funny. My mom usually watches these, but this is definitely a conversation that she probably would not expect and anticipate. Sorry, mom. But
My mom either. I know.
yeah, they're like, girl, what are you talking about? But speaking of that, to get even more deeper into that, what are you talking about? I want to pull a card for you.
All right, I'm curious. I want you to pull.
Yeah. And it's not, you know, I'm no one's like professional tarot reader, but I pull cards for myself like every morning. Like it's just always just kind of interesting to see like, you know, what I'll get and how it'll kind of connect to my day or just, you know, overall themes of like what I'm going through. So
What made you start doing that? Like what made
um,
you?
that's a great question. What made me start doing that? So so last year, I mean, this actually happened before the pandemic. Like before the pandemic, I was just kind of like, you know, like reflecting on like my next chapter, right? And really just, I had already started pulling very inward into myself. And then we were in quarantine and I was like, oh, okay, great. You know what I mean? It's just like an opportunity to have more space and time to really kind of think and, you know, create like what I want to create and, you know, think about like a new business and just think about all the things, right? And so during all that thinking, I I ended up getting a reading from someone. And I've never like really like I've had like one reading before that, but it was like a very like short kind of unexpected reading. But this was like an official reading from like this amazing woman based out in San Francisco. And, you know, just kind of talking to her, because sometimes it's just nice to like have these conversations with
Right.
people that maybe you're thinking of and things that happen to you that make you not feel like you're crazy, you know?
Right.
And for someone who is actually genuinely kind of like tapped in and they do have like this literal psychic sense, it's just helpful to get like validation and confirmation. So after talk, and I've always, even as like a little kid, always super just fascinated by all things like spirituality, not in like a dogma and like religion has always very much turned me off. Would like, and I accredit that to having this balance, like with my parents, like my mom was actually raised Catholic and then she became Baptist. But my dad, I don't know if he would identify as atheist per se, but like definitely very critical of organized religion. And it just was nice to have that balance because it just offered me, you know, different perspectives. And with me, like how that manifested as just, I was just fascinated by all of it. I'm like, ooh, Greek mythology, ooh, like let me, you know, African traditional religions, like just all of it, just consuming it all. So you know, after having this reading, it just kind of propelled me forward into just exploring it more for myself. And I was like, ooh, let me like get some cards. Like I got like oracle cards at first, which are different from tarot. It's like not as it's more straightforward. Like tarot is much more like loaded with symbols, but I've always been interested in like just symbols in general. you know, and what they refer to like historically and all this stuff, you know? So I was like, let me just go ahead and get some tarot cards, like finally, you know, because it's just like I was like baby stepping my way towards
Right.
that direction. And then finally I just was like, okay, yeah. And then I just started like studying it. So I just felt inspired to do it because fascinating. But anyway, so yes, let me got my cards here. Let me just kind of zone out for a second. And yeah, just think of, I don't know, think of calm vibes, maybe think of something that you want answered or leave it open-ended.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever feels right. So let's see. Okay, I'm gonna like close my eyes and pick out, oh, it's like literally about to like jump out on its own. I love it when that happens because to me that's always like, okay, this is definitely the card. Oh wow, okay. This is a very Scorpio card.
Oh.
But it's a scary card to most, but I don't think that this is a scary card. I'm going to tell you why, but I'll
Okay.
show you.
Ooh. Was this oh, Scorpio? Indeed.
The devil, I know. Yeah. So, you know, obviously, I mean, these cards have a lot of symbolism and it's like never so obvious. So like the devil is like, to me, is not like the devil, you know. It to me, it represents kind of materialism in a way. Like when I see like the devil card, I think of like earthly pleasures
Yeah.
in a positive way. I mean, obviously, like you could get carried away with that and it could be like
Sure.
excessive, but like in a more like balanced way, it's like literally like getting, you know, those material gains. So maybe that palm reader that said that you will just have enough. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe you're about to come into some, you know, some material gains.
I won't say no to that.
So bring it on. Well, Miss Lady.
That's great. My first tarot card is the devil.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna send you. I'm gonna send you some info on it because
Yeah.
there's way more in it than
Layers to it.
what I'm sharing. But and even like the number. So it's the number 15. And
Ooh.
15 to me, like when fives come in a reading, fives are like change.
Okay.
But the numerology behind it, so it's like 15. So it's like 1 + 5, which is 6, and 6 also represents beauty and home, and like there's something like kind of foundational related to that number. So it's almost like, I don't know, what you were saying, it kind of makes sense. Like, you know, you're entering sort of this change and it's like sort of relating to your home, you know, because your daughter's like, you know, leaving. I don't know. I see it as a positive card. So
I think it's positive too. I mean, it's like when people dream of death, right? Like death doesn't mean death. And like, I remember listening to a cousin of mine who's into like interpreting dreams, and people would, you know, you'd say, well, I dreamt about death. And she was like, well, that doesn't mean you're going to die, actually. It's like, it can be rebirth and it can be all these other symbolisms. Whereas a wedding symbolize, I remember her telling somebody a wedding actually symbolized death more than
interesting.
right. I was just like, what? Wait, what? And you dream about a wedding. So it's, you know, yeah. So I wasn't too, I'm not too worried.
About it. Yeah, because even like in tarot, like the death card, I always see that as a positive card as well, because death is like a rebirth. And it's like, to me, when something old dies, I always feel like something much better is on the way.
I agree.
Yeah. So anyway, yes. Well, I am cheersing to you again.
Me too.
We wrap up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is so great. This is good fun.
This is like so overdue, you know. I'm so excited about like what's happening, unfolding, you know, with you and your career, and Yeah.
Thank you. I'm excited too. I'm looking forward to see what the transitions will be in the new.
Yeah, we'll do
Yeah.
another one of these, and then
Yeah.
we'll see what the cards share.
Yeah, now you got me interested to go and see if I should get another like a reading. A full-on
Oh
one.
my gosh,
Yeah.
please get a read. Yeah, and if you need
Inspiring me.
any advice on that, let me know.
All
Well,
right.
I'm gonna stop recording.
Thank
So
you.
thank you guys. Bye.